Welcome to the Living Hope.
Pastor Derek Ward, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure, sir.
I am extremely excited to have this conversation. I don't want to get too much up into your life, but let's see how much we can unravel, just to give people an idea of how you actually got here and probably what we could learn from some of the things that you went through. A lot of us may know that you are a pastor's kid.
Yes.
You were a pastor's kid from before birth?
From the time I was a kid. So, my dad has been a pastor. Well, I've only known him as a pastor. He was bivocational, but my father met my mother as a preacher. He was preaching when he met my mother. And I'm the fourth of 5 boys, so it means that he was in the business for a long time before I came along.
So what was that like, growing up being a pastor's kid?
Being a pastor's kid, for us, it was normal. But as you look back at it, you realize it wasn't that normal. There were standards that you were held to, not necessarily by your parents, but by everybody else. And those standards were not the best standards to hold a child to. The standards that you would hold the pastor to, you weren't trying to hold the children to. Obviously, my father, being a pastor, he still wanted to make sure that his character wasn't tarnished by his children. So my father was kind of the disciplinarian. He would discipline us even in church.
Really?
Oh, yeah. My father had a way of disciplining us in church. My father was one of those animated preachers.
Okay.
And if he thinks that you need a discipline, it would be incorporated into the sermon. So he would preach his way off of the pulpit, and he would preach his way right down, and he would slap you. And, it would be an amen with that, wax, amen, that's
You serious?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we get to learn that when you sit in church, you didn't sit at the edge of the pew, you sit on the inside. Because
Harder to get to.
it's hard to get to. If he perceive, because he would slap a few people coming down, but the slaps would be different, obviously.
Oh.
Yeah, but I mean, you look back at it and we make jokes at those things now. We laugh at those things, and I can emulate him, and I can do that. But he would throw a good slap sometimes. Yeah.
A good in the middle of his sermon.
In the middle of the sermon, yeah.
I'm trying to imagine what that could look like. You're preaching about the love of God, and He forgives, and He's walking down saying, "High five your neighbor."
Yeah, yes, what's going on? What's going on?
And he comes to you at the
But
back
for
of
us,
your
it was
head.
never a high five. It was a side five, It was a side five, yeah. That's all the thing, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you grew up through that kind of let's call it strict regime of having to, quote unquote, not be a child in church.
Yeah.
How did that translate into your Christian walk? Were you a forced Christian in those years?
My father once said to me, to all of us actually, you will go to church. You have no choice. You will go to church until you're 16 years old. At 16, you get to make a choice. And invariably, most of my siblings at 16 made the choice. Right? We were given a choice, we made a choice, we didn't want to be in church. So we asked for our inheritance, and we went into the wilderness, and we spent wild like the prodigal son. And, some of us made it back in a good time. Some of us still on that journey coming back.
But why do you think the choice that you made was not to continue to go to church, but rather to leave?
I would like to say that the focus in my mind wasn't on discipleship. You measured a Christian standard by church attendance and being there. And therefore, I don't think that we were discipled to think that this is what we want to do in our lives. And if you give options, like I'm giving you a choice, at 16 years old, you make the choice. Obviously, most people will make the choice for the other thing, because you've never experienced that. So I will look back and say that we spent time. Probably the perspective was that you are here in this house, you see a Christian living, then you would become a Christian, and that intentionality towards discipleship was missing. And I think it helps to shape who I am as an adult and how I relate to discipleship. Am I the best at doing it with my family? Probably not. I struggle. I don't want to go to the extreme other end as well. And so it left me to struggle through what does that look like for a pastor's family, as opposed to what does it look like for me to serve somebody else somewhere in discipleship.
So in your 16 years, did you have a walk with God during those
I believe
church
so.
years?
I believe so. I mean, it's all we knew. I was born a Saturday afternoon at 4:30 p.m. and chances are I would have been at church Sunday morning if not for certain things that happened. And then, I was born at home. And then my mom, myself, and my brother, who's 16 months older than I am, we would have left, and we've been to spend a couple of weeks, probably. I don't know. But obviously I don't know. But we spent some time at a nurse in Christchurch, a midwife. Obviously she wasn't my midwife. I born without a midwife. I was just it was just me, right? So we spent some time, and that's probably why I was not in church on the day after I was born. But church wasn't an option. I mean, you had to go to church. You didn't have any options where church were concerned. So you grew up in that, and you believe that this is what you want to do. You see your parents, and you want to be like your parents. So obviously, growing up in church, we got really involved. As I said, there are 5 boys. There are 5 of us. We are all musicians. We all played in church at different stages. I like to say that my parents had children in generations. So I have 2 older brothers who are 14 and 13 years older than I am. Then is my brother who is 16 months older than I. And then my little brother who's 9 years younger than me. So 3 different spurts.
Yeah.
I always wondered why he was all by himself. They didn't give him a partner, right? Everybody else have a partner a year apart. So we all grew up playing music in church. It was part of who we were. So yes, I would say that we had a walk. Or what we believe was a walk with Christ.
Okay. So, wow. So you've now gotten the chance to make that decision. You've made that decision at 16, I'm going to leave church. What did that look like, and where did you go?
Well, I went to the fields, man. I remember when I turned 16, I remember knocking on my parents' door, and I said, that's it, I'm done.
You
done.
literally knocked on the door the morning at home?
Yeah.
Said, I'm not going to church?
I'm not going to church. No. Was there pushback? Of course there was pushback. But you can't give the option and then push back on the option you've given. Plus, I've had the example of those who've gone before me.
Your brothers.
My brothers, right? And I went out in the world and I tried to live my life. At 16, you're now finishing secondary school. You're looking for a job. I went to the Barbados Defense Force for a little while. I was a security guard. I live life.
Partying, drinking, smoking.
I don't know how to respond to the partying and drinking. Okay. None of us were really drinkers. Okay. But at 16 years old, I did get drunk. I remember it was an All Year's night. My parents left. They went to church. Watched night service.
Yeah.
My best friend, my best friend from the time we were 11 years old, he came over. He brought the booze, and, so it was like a 1.5 bottle of rum. And wow. we sat. We were just drinking rum and talking, and and it's like I didn't feel drunk. I felt good. So I said to him, man, this rum thing really is nothing. So let's go and get another bottle of rum. So there's a shop like 1, 2, 3 houses away from us. So we're gonna go and get another bottle of rum from the shop and continue drinking. We never made it to the shop. We opened the door to go out and we went out and that wind hit you in your face. It's like we were all over the place. I'm told that I was laying on the road. And there were guys playing dominoes who came, they picked us up, put us back in the house, and left us. When my parents got home from church, which now would be New Year's Day, my mother said the first thing she noticed was the smell of vomit. When they opened that door, the smell of vomit. So my best friend was in my bed, and I was in my brother's bed, and the vomit was meeting each other in the middle, right? Maybe we were just out. We were sick. Actually, I was sick for like 21 days. I had a hangover for like 21 days after that. And you know, my friend, I have uncles who live nearby. One is a paramedic. He was a paramedic in the army. So these guys came over. They tried all these home remedies. You know, give you stuff to drink, shaking up soda and pouring it in your face. And my friend came through, and he was like woozy, and he heard them say, "Well, at least Sean is back." But you're not getting any response from Derek. And Sean was like, "Don't let Derek die. Don't let Derek die." So, you know, I did come through, and my mother made us promise that when we started to work, that we were going to buy her 2 beds, because obviously we would have
destroyed.
Yeah, damaged the beds.
Did you buy her the beds?
I don't remember. That was so long ago. But so say drinking, that was like the first experience I had. And because it was such a bad experience, obviously you didn't gravitate to that. So when I told people I don't drink alcohol, people think, oh, it's this religious thing. No, it's that I almost died. I almost died with this. Never was a smoker. Like as a young guy, you're playing out in bands. You know, you go play in a band. So I never bought cigarettes. But guys in the band will have these cigarettes called Colts.
Okay.
A Colt was tobacco soaked in wine, and it had this nice plastic filter on it, you know, and they would give you a Colt. So you're out playing, and a Colt was, you know, I don't think I ever inhaled. You just puffing the cigarette, and you do that every now and again. You're out playing, but I've never been really a smoker.
Okay.
And I could tell people I've lived all this time. I've never once even smoked marijuana. You know, so I will smoke a Colt or 2, but I wouldn't say that I was a smoker.
You weren't a smoker?
No.
And you say you weren't you and your brothers weren't party people per se, because
not really. Not really. I've been to a few parties, but it's not like I live for the party. You know, you have friends, and you go to parties. Then we had clubs like September's and the Pier Head. And
are any of those clubs around today?
Well, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay.
I figure not. I think the club scene is different today than it was. I remember Club Maliki, and here was Hotel, and so because I live in St. Peter, it was easy just to go down to Club Maliki. But it wasn't a regular thing for me to go clubbing. You'll go with your friends, and you'll hang out, and you know, we never wonder how we getting back home. You know, you leave home at 10 o'clock, you go and you enjoy your night, and then the last song was "The Sun Will Rise Tomorrow." Tomorrow, the sun, whatever that song says, and you know it's time to go and get a bus and go home. And you're going home and the sun is out. But that wasn't a regular thing. It wasn't like every weekend. You know, every now and again you do that. So yeah.
So when you left church, you really only left church?
I had my my way of enjoying life.
Okay.
You know, I thought it was. I just wanted to direct my own path. That's all it was. You know, you left church. And obviously, you're away from the environment. What you find is that you get caught up in all sorts of other things, you know. So it wasn't drugs, it wasn't alcohol. Girls was a good pastime for me. I believe that God had given me as a gift to girls, you know what I mean? It was that sort of thing, but
I've never read that in the Bible. Gift of girls is not something.
Man, you're reading the wrong text. Right? So, but you know, I was out there. But I went into the field of work. Obviously, you grow up, your parents didn't have the resources by which to, you know, continue going to school. As a matter of fact, I couldn't continue because I wasted my time in school. You know, I went to school. I was not interested in education.
Really?
Nah, never was. I got to school. So we ran a little bit. In my primary school, I went to all-boy primary school.
Okay.
And I remember when I did 11 plus, I got 215 with an A. And I missed going to Coach Parry by like 1 mark, right? Coach Parry was like 216 to go to Coach Parry. I had an uncle, I still have that uncle, but he was a teacher at Coach Parry. He said, we're going to get you into Coach Parry. I mean, you're just off by 1 mark. And I cried. I said, I don't want to go to Coach Parry. Coach Parry was an all-boys school. I don't want to come out of an all-boys school and go back to an all-boys school. So I passed for St. James Secondary, which was a new school, and it was co-ed. So I wanted to go to St. James Secondary School, and I cried, and my uncle said, no, Coach and Parry is a better school, and whatever. I cried, I don't want to go to all-boys school.
Again.
As life would have it, when I was going into second form in secondary school, Coach and Parry went co-ed.
Oh.
Yes. Coach
Wonderful.
and Parry went co-ed. They brought in the girls. I was like, I should have gone to Coach and Parry school. That's, you know, but so you know, I was distracted by the girls in school. I was distracted by sports. I used to play table tennis and badminton. Everybody at that school played badminton. The school was new. I mean, when you got to that school, you could smell the wood. It was so new. We had everything you could think about. So I played badminton. I was not much of a track person. I didn't like sprinting, but for sports, I would run the long distance, you know, 8 or 15. Okay. And that was better, but I mean, I don't have any medals to prove anything, right? Because everybody had to be involved, you know, everybody had to run and high jump and do those things. But table tennis was my thing. I love table tennis, badminton. Okay. So I guess I'm a racket type of person.
Probably learned that from your father, the flick of the wrist.
Oh yeah, my father. Oh man, I could tell stories for the rest of the year about my father. So I played those things, and then I was in the cadets. Okay. And I was sold out to the cadets. I was sold out because of the military feel to cadets, and I eventually became sergeant major. I was the head of the cadets at that school.
Really?
Yeah. Nice. And obviously from that, you know, you think you're gonna have a life in the military, and that was it. I wasted my time in school. I didn't do well in school.
As in, you mean up to
academically?
CXCs?
Yeah, academically. Okay. I didn't do well not because I couldn't, but because I was otherwise focused. You know, and
because you have a master's.
I do. My master sits in heaven. Yes, I do have a master's degree. And it's not because I thought I was going to be brilliant. It's that somebody else saw the potential in me and said, you should just go and study. And that person is my wife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Big up to the wife.
Yeah. So I was a policeman. I would have joined the police force. I was a member of the police band. And then I left the band. I was in the regular sided force. So I did traffic. My main thing was traffic. I work in traffic, riding motorcycles. And I loved it. I loved that, you know.
You love the trafficking, or you love the riding the motorcycles?
I love the riding the motorcycles, man. My grandfather was a rider. My uncle was, so I grew up with a motorcycle around, you know. We would sneak out the motorcycle and push it down the road and go. And so, you know, yeah, the things that I wouldn't want my children to do, I did, you know what I mean? But I love policing. And I remember my wife saying to me, there's so much more that you can do. And eventually I had this vision. I'm going to leave the police force and I'm going to work in social services. So my last stint in the police force was a department called Juvenile Liaison Scheme, where we offered juveniles a second chance in life if you were caught in petty crimes, as opposed to going through the criminal justice system. We offered counseling and guidance. And that's where my last stint in the police force was. And then I remember I saw an ad for a job in social services, and I said, I'm going to apply for that job. But the time had passed. You know, all the qualifications were listed in the newspaper, and I don't have those qualifications. I had the gift of the gab. That's all I had. I could talk, right? And I remember talking to some person who was working in the agency, and I told him, you know, I was interested in the job, but the deadline had passed. The person said, just apply for the job. It says deadlines and qualifications is a way to weed out certain people. Just apply. So I applied for the job, and I remember going for the interview. And the mistake that they made in that interview is that they called me in first. I have the gift of the gap, so I went in and and the requirement was a master's, and I didn't have no master's degree. And I said, I don't have a master's degree, but I have a master in heaven. And you know, I given that spill, and I was like, cool. And when I came out, I remember saying to all the other guys who were sitting there waiting for the interview, I says, guys, I got the job.
So everybody else that was waiting to do the same interview, you told them you got the job.
I got the job, and I just left. I didn't have the job. You know, the last thing I said to the interviewers was, when can I start? You know, I would need at least 3 months because I have to give notice to the police force. And I walk out and say, but I got the job. And I went along. I got a call 2 weeks later, I had the job.
Then you got the job.
I said, well, 3 months notice. I told the commissioner of police, obviously by writing, you know, and
Wow.
the commissioner thought I was going into full-time ministry.
At that time?
Yeah, because they knew I was a pastor.
So we've jumped a lot of things.
Oh, sorry.
So you've just told us that you're married. You've told us that you have kids, in not in so many words.
Okay.
Went into the police. You left. You went to do...
I went to the child care board.
Right. But before you got there, when did you recommit to God, and how did that happen?
Boy, that has been a journey. I think in my head, I recommitted to God 1,000,000 times.
Okay.
Right? Everything, something terrible happened. You know, I would go to church and I would repent. And I would cry.
What define terrible? What do you mean by terrible?
I mean, something bad happened in life. I'll give you an example of one. On the 23rd of September, 1988.
Don't ask. Don't.
Just I'm trying to figure out where were you, right? 23rd of September, 1988. I was involved in an accident. My brother, myself, and 2 guys, all was in the same car. So we got into an accident, and the car burst into flames. So this car is burning. My brother was trapped in the car. Another guy was also trapped in the car. And long story short, that guy died. My brother got out. I was able to, I went back into the car. The car was burning. I went back in the car and I started to pull my brother out. And then he said, he can't move. And I was just dragging it. You know, we got him out the car. Then I went back. I went in the back of the car to get the other guy out, but the flames were just there. And somebody pulled me out of the car. I don't know who it was. Somebody pulled me out of the car. That guy died. It was such a sad night. Families were really close. So obviously that put some sort of, you know, kind of tension between the families. But these guys were all in a band together. My brother and these two guys, I was, by that time I was a policeman. And it was a terrible night. So that guy died. And so that was one of those bad experiences. I went back to church and I cried and I begged the Lord to forgive me, because I knew if I had died that night, my soul would have been lost. And I believe the Lord forgives you. And as the impact of the event wears off, you tend to drift back to those behaviors and attitudes, and you're not interested in church anymore. You know, you go to church every now and again. And so that was probably the worst experience of my life. 1988. It took me a good few years after that before I was truly converted.
Okay.
So when I told my mom, I think this is it, I'm truly converted, my mom said, well, this is 101 times, because you've done this over and over and over again. And you would come and you'd be so genuine, you would cry, and you know, you would ask God to forgive you, and you would start off good. But again, it goes back to the idea that if there was no real form or focus on discipleship. There was a focus on evangelism. Give your heart to the Lord. And so you go to church, and that was what was happening. And obviously, if there's nothing to keep you engaged and, you know, just come to church and sing and go back home, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I would have gone back in the world so many times. And I remember, so I wasn't married yet at that time. As I remember, this guy died, and my father was going to be the preacher at the funeral, and he needed some person to play the keyboard. So he asked me to play the keyboard at the...
Oh, you're a keyboard player too?
I could, back then, I could hold my own back then. I wouldn't say I'm a keyboard player. I'm a trumpet player.
Okay.
But obviously, you know, I grew up in a family where there were always guitars, so everybody played guitar. So all of us have like our instrument and then guitar, right? And keyboard was, you know, I could hold my own. So I went to play keyboard, but I left and said, I'm going to meet a girl. That was my focus.
After the funeral?
Well, at the funeral.
Oh.
I'm not really, my father wanted me to play keyboard. I didn't really want to go, but I said, well, I'm going to go and meet a girl.
Okay.
And that's where I met Sharon. at the
At the funeral.
Yeah, you know, she was just a lass over there crying. It was her family who had died, and I was like, oh, she needs comforting, you know, that sort of thing. So that's where I met Sharon, and you know, we started off a friendship, and we became involved, and we got married. But so how I came to know the Lord in our courtship. Every time Sharon called me by my full name, I knew that that meant the relationship was over. So she would say, Derek Ward, we need to talk. And every time she said that, it was like, this is not working, you know, well, whatever the case may be. So I didn't like it. Up to this day, if she calls me by my full name, I'm expecting some sort of bad news, right? So it's like, that would happen. But she got invited, and maybe that her story, you'll hear her story at some time, but she got invited to church to sing with a youth choir. And she was like, I'm not a Christian. They said, well, just come and sing. She went and she sang, and then she started going to church. I was like, why would you do that? Why would you start going to church? Because I'm thinking now, you know, I know what church is. I know, you know, there are certain principles that you will live by. So I started to go to church with her, not because I was interested in church. I was interested in her. And the pastor was this young fella. I really, you know, yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this young fella was a pastor. I was like, I'm going to keep an eye on my interests, right? The pastor befriended me. We became really good friends. He had no agenda. Well, I don't know if he had agenda, but we were just good friends. We would talk. And I remember the 1st of March, 1992. At that time, Sharon and I, we weren't talking. That was one of those periods where she was like, we're done. And I was out enjoying my life. And I was just going home, and I know I'm not going by her. I'm just going home. And somehow I'm just driving towards where that church was. And I remember driving to that church. They were inside. They were having a prayer meeting. And I parked the car outside. I got out of the car. I walked right into the church, walked past everybody there, went straight to the altar. And I said, Lord, I'm here. I'm here. Nobody.
Why?
I don't know why nobody said anything to me. No, I just went straight to the altar and I started prayer. And I remember saying to the Lord, Lord, this time is for real. It's for real. And it was. It was. I think that was the moment that
Nothing
it clicked.
happened. There was no
Nothing. No
accident
trauma.
on the
No
road.
nothing. All that happens is the woman starts speaking to me. Maybe, I don't know.
That was enough trauma.
That's trauma. So I went and I said, this is for real.
Oh, man. Okay.
And I started my journey. Now, did I walk a straight line from there? No, I mean, you know, you struggle, you slip. But I think that pastor was really necessary in my life. He was young, just a few years older than I am. And he understood that journey. He provided discipleship. Right? So I don't know if the church would speak of discipleship the way we speak of discipleship, but he provided that for me, right? Through that one-on-one, that friendship. And it got to the point where people thought that we were brothers. We were hanging out together all the time. So I would go to church. Some Sundays I would go to church in police uniform because I have to go to work. And I told people, I was in church for like two years and I didn't take communion, because communion was served after the sermon, and I would normally leave church before the sermon. I had to go to work, and so that environment. And I remember saying to the pastor after I got saved, I said to him, I'm not coming here to warm benches. Got to find something for me to do. He was the sole musician in the church. He would play music all by himself. I said, I can play a guitar. So he found an old bass guitar somewhere, and we cleaned it up, and he would play the rhythm guitar, I would play the bass guitar. I was not much of a rhythm guitar player. I was a bass guitar player. And that's how I got involved in church, because I didn't come in to warm the bench, because I figured if I'm warming the bench, there's going to be a time when I can just be like, I'm gone. So I got involved in that, and eventually started teaching Sunday school. Eventually became the Sunday school superintendent of the church. And that was I started that in 92. In 1995, I was asked to go and start a Sunday school in the city.
Oh, before you get there, at what point of that period did you get married?
Oh, I got married in 1993.
Oh, okay.
Right? So
after you got the year, you got saved.
I got saved in 92. So I got saved
married.
in March 92. I got married in June 93.
And was Sharon saved by that time?
She was saved before me.
Oh.
So remember, she started going to church first,
yeah.
right? And so she started going to church at the end of December 91, early January. I think she started in December because the convention she was going to sing for was early January.
Okay.
So she started practicing with the choir. And then she never stopped going to church. So she was in church. And the truth is, we were involved. Obviously, when we met, we weren't Christians, and you know, we had a relationship.
Yeah.
So the struggle was, how do we maintain our relationship without having relations?
Yeah.
And then be involved in church. And that was hard. So, you know, we realized, look, this thing is hard. We made a commitment and, you know, we're not going to be doing this anymore. We want to serve the Lord. But, you find yourself in a loop all the time. And then, you know, I proposed to her in the strangest of ways. It wasn't no dinner. It wasn't no down on my knees. It wasn't no present, no ring, nothing like that. I simply says, you think that you could wake up next to me for the rest of your life? That was it.
And she said yes?
And she said yes. I said, well, let's get married.
Okay.
And she said, but you have to talk to my father. No problem. I talked to her father. Her father said, I can't choose for my children. If this is what she wants, this is what it is. So
It sounds like he didn't choose you.
No, he didn't choose me. I chose him. Yeah, but you know, my father-in-law has always been type that his children make their own decisions, and whatever they decide, he's going to support them. So that's how I ended up getting married. So around 16 months after knowing her, we got married, and the rest is history.
So now let's jump back to 1995. You're superintendent
Yes.
of
the Sunday school.
the Sunday school, right?
So I'm asked to start a Sunday school in the city.
No, but wait, sorry. Before you get into that, you're no longer going to your father's church at this point.
No. When I left my father's church, I was 16 years old. I would go back and you know, but when in 1992 when I gave my heart to the Lord, it was in this small church in the village where my wife lived, and that's where she was going. I chose to go there. Mostly people in that church was in my age group. If I had gone back to my father's church, I'll be among people who were 20, 30 years older than I am. And I didn't see that working.
Did that impact your relationship with your father?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. You know, my father would be like, I have a church, and you're building up somebody else's church. You know, this is, yeah, definitely impacted. I mean, to say A, got to say B. I never had a chummy relationship with my father. The relationship with my father has always been very tense. You know, we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. And then when I started going to church, and I started reading the Word of God for myself, we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, scripturally. And we would start discussions, and those discussions would become heated because I was like, I don't see what you're saying. I don't see that in the text. You know, certain practices that they had based on scripture, and I didn't see it in the text. I couldn't get it. So we would lock horns very often. But I mean, outside that, he was my father. I mean, we had a relationship, but we were better apart than we were together.
So when you got, when you got married, and we'll get to the point of you having children at some point, but when you got married, did your relationship with your father impact your relationship with your wife and then later on your children?
Absolutely.
How so?
Absolutely. I don't recall my father ever telling me that he loved me. And that kind of created the framework for how I relate to my own children. As I told you, I've always known my father to be a Christian, but I've seen the major disagreements between my father and my mother. So I always think I don't want that for my own marriage. So I learned some lessons from my father, that from the good and the bad, from my father that took me into my marriage. And I look back and I said, my father did the best that he could do. He did the best he could do. But you know, it's like I don't know if I want that. I guess there are some things that I would have done in my marriage that my children would look and say, I don't know if I want that for me either. So I'm not here to throw my father under the bus.
Right.
You know,
Right.
my father was a good man. He was an excellent pastor, and I often say he wasn't the best father because he was more focused on ministry than he was on family. But that was the culture of the time, ministry over family.
Yeah.
And that has impacted my ministry because it's family over ministry for me. So yeah, it impacted the relationship I had with my wife and eventually with my children.
Did your wife ever, I don't know, say things like you're just like your father or any of those things?
No.
No. Okay,
No.
that's very good.
No, because she knew that if she had said that it wouldn't have ended well. No, but other people said it, you know.
Really?
Yeah, other people said it. You're just like your father. People still say that up to this day. Yesterday, I officiated the funeral yesterday, and a guy came up to me afterwards and said, "You're Brother Ward's son." And I said, "Yes." He said, "But you're just like your father."
How does that make you feel?
It doesn't bother me now.
Okay.
I get to realize that, you know, this is just part of what it is.
His blood still flows.
Yeah,
through you. Oh.
but there was a time when I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to hear that I'm just like my father. I want to be different. You know, my father had a mole on his shoulder, right behind here, right? 5 boys, and the only one that's going to get that mole is me. I was like, what? So
okay.
I got it chopped off.
Really?
Yeah,
Just because you didn't want to be like your
because
father.
when I see it, it will remind me of, and I didn't want that, so I got it chopped off, and it grew back, and I got it chopped off the second time, so I cut it off twice, and I mean, it didn't come back the third time.
Okay.
But down to that, it's like I don't want something that reminds me that I'm like him, right? But it doesn't bother me now. I like the fact that people can say you're like your father, because most people who say that know my father as a Christian, as a pastor, and you know. So the guy who talked to me at the funeral said, "Boy, when you were preaching, I can see your father. You had all the antics like your father." And I was like, "Well, it's in the blood, man."
Oh, so you're what's the word? Animated preacher like your father.
Yeah. I don't slap. I don't slap.
Man.
Yeah.
Visit Harvest, guys, if you want to see Pastor Derek coming down and slapping the congregation.
Yeah. I don't do that. But I had to come to grips that you know, this is who I am. This is who he is. I mean, I love my dad. I love my father. Sometimes I wish he was still around to see, you know, what we've achieved, even as a church, you know. But yeah.
Okay, great. So now you are starting the Sunday school program in a small community.
So the genesis of it is a minister from one of our churches. I was part of a denominational movement. The minister from one of our churches, he was into prison ministry. And the government gave him a building, an old government building, so he can use it as kind of a halfway house for guys coming out of prison to help them to you know, get back into society. And he said he's going to dedicate one of those rooms to be used by the church for whatever purpose. So they asked me to organize a Sunday school in the community.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, I'm down for that. So Sharon and myself, we would go to this community. We spent 6 months in this community before we launched our Sunday school. We would go to work, we would leave work on the evening, we would go to the community, we would walk street to street, door to door.
Doing what?
Just talking to families. You know, we're going to be starting a Sunday school, do you have kids, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is what we're doing. You can send your kids to Sunday school. 6 months we did that. And I remember I would put bullhorns on the top of my car, and I would drive through the community, and I would talk about the Sunday school that's coming. You know, I would ride there on the police motorcycle, and you know, you're talking to people. And 6 months later, we launched the Sunday school in that building, Sunday school. And
This was a Sunday evening Sunday school?
Sunday morning.
Sunday morning?
Sunday morning. So the plan was, I don't remember what time we started, but we were starting an hour and 15 minutes earlier than my local church would have started church.
Okay.
So the idea was we would go there, we would spend an hour doing Sunday school. It would give me 15 minutes to drive to get to the local church. So the plan was do the Sunday school here. Obviously, I'm missing the Sunday school at my local church. Somebody else now would have been running that Sunday school. Do the Sunday school, drive 15 minutes, get to local church for service.
Okay.
First morning of Sunday school, the bishop was so excited. He said, there are more people here than in some of our churches.
Really? About how many people would have
We had 40-something people. Remember, the average church in Barbados is quite small. I mean, the average church is 30 people.
Okay.
Right? People look at bigger churches and think that's the norm. Bigger churches are never the norm. Smaller churches are the norm because churches have kind of a community feel to it. People in the community walk to church. Yeah. And I remember the bishop saying, there are more people here than some of our churches. And then he said, we're going to make this a church.
Okay.
So the concept of starting a Sunday school went from Sunday school to church.
Being a pastor.
Just like that.
That's how you went into pastorship?
Yes. Yes. I was not ready. Wow. I was not emotionally ready. I don't think I was mature enough to.
You weren't equipped with the right skills,
I didn't have anything. But we knew how to do church. So I moved from preparing a Sunday school lesson, which I was good at by this time, to having to prepare a Sunday school lesson, a sermon, a Bible study, run a youth ministry, and do all of that. And it was hard because Sharon will have to lead worship. And while she's leading worship, I'm playing the keyboard or the guitar or something. And then I have to get up and I have to preach. And then, she has to pray for the offering. And we did, because we are talking about young people in this community who had no church experience whatsoever. They didn't know the songs. They didn't know how to pray. They didn't know anything. So it was really Derek and Sharon having church with all these young people.
Come. Oh, yeah. Wow. And they were all young people?
All young people. But we had about 6 or 7 parents. But majority of the people there were still in school.
You had 34, 33, 32 people in high school, in secondary school?
Yes. Yes. Wow. So we did that.
That's amazing.
We did that for like 2 years.
So wherever that church was just a church of young people?
Church of young people.
That is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. But we saw growth. We saw people growing. I can remember one time a pastor came and visit and was telling me, there's a young man there with earrings in his ears. You need to tell him to take out his earrings and all sorts of stuff. I said, why would I do that? Why would I do that? If he's going to take out his earrings, he's going to take them out himself. I'm not telling, because he will take them out here, but put them in when he goes.
Yeah.
So because you're young, you don't know much about. Everybody wants to advise you as to. But I had my father as an example. I'm a pastor's kid.
Yeah.
But then I did that for 2 years, and.
You had children by this time?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
That's probably better.
It was better. Okay. So while there is that, we got pregnant while we were there.
Oh, okay. During that 2-year period.
During that 2-year period. So then Asher was born at that location. Well, not at that location, but Asher was born during the time when we were at that location.
Yeah.
And I remember we went on a vacation, and when we came back, everything was in chaos. We came back, we found 6 people.
How long was your vacation?
We been there for 2 weeks.
2 weeks? And when you came back, there's nobody. That means you only missed 2 Sundays.
I missed 2 Sundays. But there's a backstory to that which I prefer not to share.
No problem.
But we came back, we found 6 people. And it was a struggle. So you have 6 people, 6 young people. The parents don't trust us anymore to send back their kids. People that didn't trust us anymore.
For just 2 weeks?
2 weeks. But I mean, in those 2 weeks, something happened.
Yeah.
And have a young baby. We were struggling. And I'm talking about, we reached the point where I didn't even want to go to church, period. That's how rough it was. And then, you turn up and the place was locked. You were standing outside and I mean, everything just went downhill.
Wow.
And I remember saying, I can't do this.
Wow.
Can't do this. And we, I called the overseer and I said, we can't continue like this. I'm going back to my local church. We went back to the local church.
So you officially closed that location?
Yes, we closed it.
Okay.
So we went back to our local church. We were too embarrassed not to go to church. We only went to church because we were too embarrassed to stay home. But that church loved us back to health. I talk about to the point where I felt like I can be involved now in teaching Sunday school again and preaching, you know, because I remember the pastor, I mean, he's my good friend. We were really tight. He said, boy.
This is the same pastor
that befriended me before.
Okay.
So when we got back, he said, boy, we sent you as a Sunday school superintendent, we're taking you back as a pastor, right? So, but he knew that we were in a bad place, you know, we struggled, and they loved us back to health, And as soon as I I felt I was back on my feet, I got a invitation to go and pastor another church.
Oh, wow.
In the same organization. So I thought that I was going to pastor that church that we were at, and that the pastor was going to go somewhere else. No, they were sending me somewhere else. They were sending me to a rural parish in the east. And I was like, man, that's so far.
So just to be clear, you planted a church in a small community. Yes. Never happened well. You're now being sent to plant another church. Not to plant this time, to take over. Okay, another church.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the church that we went to take over. It was there for a while, but it was struggling. Again, this is a community church. And when we got there, it was just Sharon and myself and 6. And there's something about the number 6 because when we left, the other was
6 as well.
It was six people, and one of those 6 people was one child who was coming there, obviously because the mother was coming there. Sharon and Derek Ward were the youngest people.
Wow.
The youngest people in that congregation.
Were you 30 at that time?
I probably wasn't yet 30.
You were the youngest people.
I mean, actually that year, I was 30 that year.
Wow.
That year was 30.
You're older than your wife?
Yeah.
And you were the youngest?
I was the youngest man. She was the youngest woman. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the plan was we can go there for 2 years, see if we could help build some strength and bring some health to the organization. We spent 11 years.
Spent 11 years at that church.
And it grew.
But that shows some skills that maybe you never knew you had, or some competencies that maybe God was using the not so nice things of the past to nurture for you to be able to do this now.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things was I'm very relational. So I built relationships with the community. I can still go to that community now and walk into houses because of the relationships that we've built.
That's excellent.
Right? So we built relationships. There's a lady there now. Stefan was born at that church. Well, you know what I mean. So I'm creating a trend now. Wherever I pass, there's a child coming, right? So
does that mean something else?
No. No. But there's a lady from that church who adopted Stefan.
Really?
Yeah. So we went to that church 1st of August, 1999. Stefan was born in January 2000. And she adopted Stefan, like she was his mother. So Asher was a Country Road baby. Stefan was a Clifton Hall baby. And but we spent 11 years with those people.
Wow.
Yeah.
After 11 years, you left that church. What happened after you left? Went to another church. They said, no, we needed to now go and pastor somewhere else. What happened?
So that church, we had a fire. We had a small fire, right? That's why it was told it was a small fire. The weekend of the fire, I was in Grenada doing ministry. And people were calling me to tell me that there was a fire, but obviously, I don't know. So I remember when I got home, the Monday morning, the first flight out of Grenada to Barbados, and I called Sharon because I left the car at the airport. I was going to drive straight to work. Remember, I was bivocational. I was going to drive straight to work. Sharon said, maybe you should go to the church first. I said, why would I want to go to the church? She said, because they had a small fire last night. I said, well, I'll go after work. She said, no, you should go now. And I'll meet you there. So I drove through the back, all through St. Philip, came through to St. John. And it was indeed a small fire, but the building was also a small building. So
the small fire consumed the small building. Okay.
So the only thing that was left were these two concrete columns at the front. And I probably can find photos of that. I do have photos somewhere of that. These two concrete, the entire wooden structure was gone. We had just invested in equipment, sound equipment. The equipment probably worth more than the building. You know what I mean? Everything was gone. Everything was gone. And I think that was where the downward spiral started to happen. You know, it was tense. You're trying to find some place to carry the congregation. And a lot of decisions were being made. But then you had the denominational bureaucracy that you were governed by. And things just got really bad. And then we started to feel the same way like we felt in the previous you know, you feel like you're pouring out everything and you're drained. And I remember I can't do it anymore. So I resigned.
You formally resigned?
I formally resigned as the pastor. Before I reached the point of that frustration of resigning, I was ordained. I was ordained as a bishop in the church.
Oh, so I'm sorry. Sorry, Bishop. I should be referring you.
I'm still there at Ward. So I was now sitting at the highest level of sitting in the College of Bishops, if you want to put it that way. And so it was hard. It was hard. You know, you're sitting here, and so it was hard to make that decision to resign as a pastor. So I resigned as a pastor, but I remained in the bishopric. I still continue to function like that. And we had to make a decision where we were going to go. My wife was like, we're going to just find somewhere else outside of the denominational body. And I didn't feel the release. I didn't feel like God said it's time to go. But I didn't want to go back to the church, that small church where we started. And so I ended up going to a church in Cave Hill.
Even though you had that good friend, that disciple?
Yeah, he wasn't there, no, he had moved.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, that's where we grew up there more or less. So we had a lot of friends still there. But I didn't want to go back there. So we went to a church in Cave Hill because most of the people in the church in Cave Hill were now in my age group. And, you know, we were friends. And so we went to Cave Hill on the first Sunday of 2011, first Sunday. And we stayed there. Sharon didn't go to church that Sunday because Sharon was like, moving on, we're moving on. And I said, Sharon, I don't feel the release. I feel like God still has something for us to do. But, you know, I had to be built back up again, and then got back to a place where I'm in ministry preaching. And so I became an itinerant preacher. I would go from church to church and just preach. I love preaching. So I would go from church to preach. And then, you know, you start to build those relationships there again, and you got involved. And after that, there was Harvest. Yeah.
Wow. That's a journey. So now we're at building Harvest. Harvest, nobody knows what Harvest is yet. At what year did Harvest start?
So Harvest started, the idea of Harvest started in 2015.
All right. So what happened leading up to 20? How did you know
of Harvest?
This is now where you were supposed to go to plant a church and not have a new baby? That
was the important thing. No more babies. Right, but I didn't know. I was quite comfortable being itinerant, just move around, do my stuff. I was comfortable. As far as I'm concerned, I was never going back into pastoral ministry. That era was past. I never really wanted to be a pastor. Never, ever in my life. Never.
Even though you had the mole on your...
Never. And that's the reason, because I didn't want to be like my father. So I remember, just go back slightly to come forward. I remember when I was set forward to be a minister in the church, and one of the bishops asked, how do you think you're going to live out your ministry? I said, I'll be an evangelist. And I'll go there, I will evangelize. And I will bring people, but somebody else will take care of them. I will never be a pastor.
Somebody the shepherds. I
didn't want to be a pastor, but, you know, that happened. But in 2015, there's a friend of mine. He's from the same denominational movement, a guy named Iredell Pompey. I knew Iredell for a while. He was in St. Vincent, and we you know, but then he was now living in Barbados.
Okay.
He had a friend who was coming to the island for a night. And he called me up and said, I need to borrow your car because I need to do something. I need to get a car. I said, well, why do you want to borrow my car? You have a new brand vehicle. I talk about straight out the show window, you know. He had a new brand vehicle. Why you want to borrow my old jalopy, you know, that, you know, probably going to break down the road. He said, man, I went to the gas station and they put gasoline in my tank. So he had a diesel vehicle. So he couldn't move the vehicle. I said, but I'm out. I can't help. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to go to the airport to pick up a couple who's going to spend the night with me and then fly out tomorrow morning. I said, but look at that. I'm at the airport. So I went to the airport to pick up some person who was passing through the island. I didn't know this person who was coming. A friend of mine asked me to take care of this young lady for a day.
Okay.
She was coming to get a visa. So I'm at the airport to pick up this young lady. Ayadel says he have this couple coming. I said, but I'll pick them up and drop them to your house. Just tell me what they look like, give me the name, whatever. So I'm waiting for this guy to come. My person came out. We were sitting waiting for this couple to come out. And Ayadel calls me and said, oh, the gas station gave him a vehicle for the night. So he's going to come to the airport and get people. I said, well, I'll wait till you get here. So if the person is here, I'll just wait with them till you get here. So when the person came out, you know, I went back into police mode and I said, oh, are you Mr. Lewis? And he said, yes. I said, take a seat on the bench. You know, he said, he didn't know who I was. So I just pulled the whole police thing on him, put him and his wife on the bench, took a seat on the bench. They're looking at me like, you know, so I had the real persona there. And then eventually I broke character and I said, Ayadel sent me to get you, but he's on his way, blah, blah, blah. And we just start talking. Yeah. This is the guy called Kenyatta. We start talking. And you know, you can hear, our man thought he's a preacher. I said, you're a preacher? He said, not really, you know, and we just start talking about church and stuff. That was it. Ayadel turns up. Kenyatta and his wife gets in Ayadel's car, and his daughter, a little girl, get in Ayadel's car. I pick up my person. We went separate ways. The story is told that when they got to the house, the gas station called and told Ayadel, your vehicle has been fixed, come and get it. He leaves to go and get the vehicle. Kenyatta is talking to Stacy, who is Ayadel's wife, and said, I've just been appointed as the director of church planting for the Caribbean. Oh, wow. And I'm looking for some guys who I can, you know, interview, whatever. She does not know what happened at the airport. Right. She says, there's a guy named Derek Ward that you should probably talk to. He's okay, cool. Conversation done, they went to sleep. He wakes up in the morning, he's dressing to catch a plane to go to St. Vincent where he lives. And he's telling, over breakfast, he's telling Ayadel the same story. I'm looking for some guys. Ayadel said, you should talk to Derek Ward. He said, who's Derek Ward? Derek Ward is the guy you met in the airport last night. So they call me. We need to have a conversation with you, blah, blah, blah. About what? About church planting? Nah, not doing that. Not doing that.
Evangelism, sure.
Yeah. So I've done that pastor thing. I'm not going back there. So he said, man, so I said, okay. I was working at telecommunications at the time. Okay. I said, well, I can give you 40 minutes of my time today at lunch. Kenyatta goes to the airport, puts his wife and daughter on a plane and misses the flight. He misses the flight. He allowed him to go home. He stays. Wow. So we met for lunch. I'll never forget, we were at Sky Mall. We met for lunch. And he starts to tell me all about Harvest. And I'm like, leaning in like this. I'm like, boy, if I had to do a church again, this is what it would be like. This is what it would sound like. Yeah. I'm so excited. And I called Sharon and said, I think I found a church. She said, where? I said, well, we're going to plant it. She said, no, no, not doing that. So Kenyatta, I left, he went home. And I spoke to Kenyatta every single day on the phone from that day in July of 2015. And he recruited me. I said, I'm 95% in, but Sharon is not. Sharon has to be in for me to do this. So from July, all the rest of 2015, we were talking about this. And then he went off, Kenyatta went off to the training center where they were training church planters. He wasn't going to be a church planter, but because he was going to be recruiting church planters, he needed to go through the training. So he's up there, he's telling everybody about this man, Derek Ward. I had a few phone calls with the guys in Chicago, and Sharon's still not budging. Then Kenyatta says he needs to do an assessment of me. Mm-hmm. He's leaving the training center in December. He turns up, he said, I'm going to come to Barbados to do your assessment, but I didn't want to stay in your house. I don't really know this man different to talking to him on the phone.
Yeah.
So I'm like, stay at my house. So I asked Sharon and we discuss it. We said, okay, he turns up on the 3rd of January. Mm-hmm. Stays in my house for a week. And he assessed my wife, he talked to her, he talked to my children, he talked to me, He left a friend because we built a friendship in that week. And he was like, I think you would do good. And the church, the idea of doing this was birthed over cake and ice cream. I would bake and we would buy ice cream, and he was lactose intolerant. So
fun times.
Yeah. So besides me, there were 2 other guys that he had to interview. Yeah. And he came and said, I have 2 other guys to interview. I come interview them at your house. I said, you're a madman? I'm trying to get this job, and you tell me you're interviewing 2 other guys at my house, and I'm going to sit in the interview with you. I was like, you must be crazy. So, but we did interview the guys. We gave them cake and ice cream, and both of them went to the bathroom, so we knew that they were not going to make it, right? So that was the joke around it. If you eat the ice cream, you go to the bathroom, you're not going to make it, right? So that was that. And then Sharon was still saying no. And then he invited us to St. Vincent to see the church operating. Sharon said, I'm going to St. Vincent, and I'm going to look for every loophole of this church. We found none. Everything that Kenyatta said the church does, we saw that in St. Vincent. I thought the church in St. Vincent was a model. It was a model for any other church planter in the Caribbean to see. Mm-hmm. We came back from St. Vincent knowing we're going to do this. That was March of 2016. Mm-hmm. And then the time I have to apply to be a church planter, I said, I am not applying. Y'all came to me, I am not applying. But I applied, and by August, we were in the training center. Came back at the end of the year. So I came back at the end of January 2017. Started a core group. The first meeting was in my house this Saturday. 11 people were there. I gave them commitment cards. They signed the commitment cards that they're going to be a part of this. We let them know this is not a church. This is the concept of a church. We are now starting. So if you need pastoral care, if you need somebody to be providing all this, this is not the place for you. We need people who can roll up their sleeves and work. Mm-hmm. So we had 11 people that first time. And from there, the church started to grow. And we meet in my house. We met in my house all of February, all of March. Mm-hmm. And then we were outgrowing the house. We needed some place. And that's when
outgrowing? How about how many people were you when you needed to get to a place?
So well, more than the space can hold. We were now like 20-something people in my living room. Mm-hmm. And so we're looking for a place.
What are you doing in these 2 months?
Just teaching.
Teaching what?
I'm transferring DNA. This is what the church is going to be like. Mm. So we do a Bible study, and then we talk about the church. We talk about the church DNA. What are the pillars of this church? What are the the characteristics? Yeah, okay. They're all called vision meetings.
Oh, okay.
And we met every Sunday evening at 5 in my house. So go to church. Do your own thing. Go to church on Sunday morning. So I was still going out to churches and preaching on a Sunday morning, but Sunday evening at 5 o'clock we met in our house. And the funny thing is that if we are diligent enough, we could go back and find all those videos. We streamed everyone. We had cell phones on. First we were holding cell phones with our hand, and somebody would have, your role today is to just hold the cell phone. And we streamed from the very beginning. We streamed every one of our services.
Wow.
Right? So they would sing a sound, did a little teaching, and then we talked about DNA and stuff.
So when you're playing a guitar or a keyboard?
But I had Idel, so I didn't have to.
Idel plays key.
Idel plays guitar, keys, drums,
okay.
You know. I had my son, Stefan, played. So it was Idel with Stefan. Asha and one of her friends would sing. So we had, so my family could be a church, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have Stefan playing, Asha can sing, I can play, Sharon can sing. So
you had the bones.
We had the bones. So it started to grow, and then, we got the building in Goodland, 1st of April. So if it didn't work out, we could say, it was all Fool's Day. Right? But we got the building the 1st of April.
2017.
2017. And then we met in that building at 5 p.m. every Sunday up until September.
So between April and September, you were still only doing vision meetings?
Yes. The first service, the first meeting we had in that building, I believe it was the 16th of April, 2017, Easter Sunday. And we called that Vision and Praise. So we had a praise service and then I shared the vision. And people would come in and hearing the vision and people say, hey, you want to be a part of this? We are not a church. We are not a church. So there are some people who we turned away and said, you need a church. You need to be in a church.
You turned away people?
Yes, yes. Because when I assessed them, those people needed pastoral care. We are not a church. I cannot provide pastoral care for you. You need a church. Come back when we launch. And so we turned away some people, and there's some others, who came and didn't want to leave. I said, but you're not going to get what you're looking for, because if you're here, you got to work. So we had a core team which transitioned into being a launch team. And I remember Pastor Luke and Pastor Matt from the US, they would come down often. And then we started deciding, when are we going to launch this church? Or the timelines, original timelines, were we're going to have a core group for 9 months and then launch. We launched after 7 months. After 7 months, we launched the church. And that was it.
Okay. Oh, man. So you launched Harvest September
24th.
September 24, 2017.
2017.
What was that like for you to finally be able to launch Harvest?
It was very emotional. I remember I cried. I just cried all through that service. 271 souls were in that building.
Wow.
On that day when we launched. So we had what we call a soft launch. 2 Sundays in September. So those are like 10 in the morning. We just trying it. We didn't announce it. We just did. So we were trying the systems. We were trying our first impressions. We tried the Harvest Kids. So for 2 Sundays, we tried that. And then we launched on the 24th. So when people came for the launch, people couldn't believe that was the first service. But we had two soft launches to see. So the people who came and realized all these systems were working. Because we spent time teaching the culture and the DNA. This is what we want to do. This is what First Impressions will do. This is what Harvest Kids will do. So everybody knew what they had to do. So on the launch Sunday, everybody was deployed. And 271 people were in our building.
And systems were working.
Systems were working. People were excited. I said, don't get excited. Let's wait till next week. Right? The next week we had like 100 and something people. No, the next week we had 60 something people.
Okay.
I said this is more realistic. Now 60 something people is still a very good attendance in a society where you have
average is smaller than this. Yeah.
So I said no, we can probably judge it around this and not the 271. 271 people are coming because it's something new. They want to see what it is, and 60 something people the following Sunday. Then the next Sunday it was almost 100 people, and it started to grow like that. And so it continually grew until we were like maybe 180, 190 right before COVID. Then COVID came, and so we're rebuilding now to come back up. So our average attendance now is around 140, 150.
That's still very big.
Yeah, well, yeah.
In comparison to average church size in Barbados, that's still very big.
Yeah.
So in listening to your journey from a child, being a pastor's kid, planting your first church without knowing you were planting your first church, and being asked to oversee and run a new church that only had 6 people that you grew to. You didn't tell me how many people.
We grew to 20
something people, right? So that's a 3x growth in a very short.
We actually got an award for the only church in that 1 year in the convention. We got an award for the only church that doubled its membership. so easy to double your membership when you have 6. If you have 100, it's harder to double your membership.
Okay. Oh wow. So you planted the church. You I almost want to say restarted, but you built upon another church, and you were then asked to plant a church with not a part of a denomination. So a bureaucracy and I don't say politics, but the things that goes behind a denomination is no longer in existence for what you wanted to do. No, you had to essentially stand on your own feet
Yes.
to figure things out. I perceive that it may not have been as nice and easy as how the church looks today, that there probably been some challenges along the way, or maybe some things that you had to learn to maneuver, things that you never experienced before in your previous pastorship life. And I'm also assuming that throughout all of that, there's still the continuous healing that had to take place from being a pastor's kid to feeling like you failed in your first planting to seeing your heartfelt time of 11 years, church burnt down, and you're now in a space of having to plant your church. Did any of those emotions ever wanted to bring life again throughout this 7 going 8 years, I believe, of Harvest?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, I'm happy that the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. But so often you look into the rearview mirror, and it's good and it's bad, because one, it can erode your tolerance levels for certain things. So if you see certain things that kind of remind you of those bad experiences in church, you tend to want to stop it very quickly. And want to stop something very quickly, you can probably do it the wrong way, and you can probably hurt people along the way. But Harvest and everything else I've done before is 2 different experiences completely. There's some things I would want to bring from those experiences, and obviously there's some things that you just don't want to bring. But down to the level now where in a small church, you don't have to worry about the workforce. Everybody gets
works.
involved.
Yeah.
What I found now in a bigger church is that I get the impression that everybody thinks that somebody else is going to do it, and then nobody does it. So you wonder, where's the workforce? And then one of the things that we struggle with is that there are lots of people who are willing to help, but they're not willing to lead. So they say, I don't mind helping, but I don't want to lead. So I think one of our issues now where we are is to find people who are willing to say, I'll take the lead. And I think, sometimes we have to ask ourselves, did we create this environment where people think, in order to lead, I must have this level of excellence? Now, we want that, yeah, but we are still willing to work with people in that position, because people come to Harvest and they see what seems to be a well-oiled machine is working well, and they think, I don't know if I can function at that level. I often say to people, we're not looking for perfection, we just want excellence. And excellence don't mean that there are no mistakes. Excellence means that we try to be better at what we do all the time. So a simple thing is, I watch every service. I listen to every sermon. I assess every sermon, every service. And I see certain things, like take for example, on the live stream, let's say that I'm making a point and there's a slide for that point. And then on the live stream, I realized that the slide didn't come up when I was making the point. And then it came up
2 points later.
2 points later. That would irritate me. It's like, what's the sense of putting it up? No. So then you obviously speak to those things. And so that creates this feeling like, if you're not at this level, you can't serve. We just want to grow. We just want to grow. I listen to other preachers. I would figure if you are a drummer, you listen to other drummers. If you are a projectionist or a live stream person, you watch other services and see, how can I improve? That's all we're asking for. Constantly improve on what you are. Because I believe that in this country, we are, some people may still say that we are a third world country. I don't believe that. I don't think Barbados is a third world country. I think we can function above our weight, right? But some people need to be able to look at what we do and say, I see excellence. And I think that's what I thrive on. I thrive on being able to bring excellence to church. and not see church as, oh, this is something we do because, it makes you look good in society or whatever. We need to be able to impact on people. So when we talk about a high impact service Sunday morning, high impact service is not only what we do, but it's how people are impacted. And people are impacted by excellence. Right? I remember the Queen of Sheba, when she went to Solomon's palace, she said, well, the half have not been told because of the excellence. I am sure Solomon will walk through the palace and say, that's wrong, we need to fix this, we need to fix that. But people come into the palace, saw excellence. And that's what we want. We want that people will see that and that they are attracted to that. Not to us, they're attracted to the excellence. And therefore, what we do attract people, our role is to point them upward. That's why we believe that everything we do is vertical. Our worship must be vertical. Our preaching must be vertical. Everything we do must point people to Christ. But it's the excellence. So simple thing, we will start on time. It doesn't matter how many people in this room, we will start on time. Because then people get to realize that there's a standard. We start on time, right? We respect people's times. When I was a policeman, I was told we have a start time, we don't have a finish time. So, I like that. But at Harvest, we do have in our minds, we try to run service around 90 minutes, but we don't want to go to 2 hours. And that does not mean that we are quenching the Holy Spirit. That means that we understand you don't need to be here 4 hours for people to get the message, you know what I mean? So excellence is the hallmark of what we want to do.
Wow. Okay. There's just so much more to talk about. There's one other thing I want to hear about before we wrap up this session. So we know Derek the pastor, and you've told us snippets of Derek the son, but I want to understand Derek the husband and father.
I've been married for 31 and a half years.
Half is important.
Half is important. 31 and a half years. I think as a husband, that kind of reflects the ability to forgive and to beg forgiveness.
To beg?
To beg forgiveness. I believe that over the last 31 years, I've done more things where I need to be forgiven than has been done to me. Right? So Derek, the husband, I'm always trying to see my biblical role as a husband as being the priest of my household, to lead my family well, lead my wife well, to be able to set the tone for what goes on. I also believe that marriage is a partnership. I'm not the expert on everything, and Sharon is way better at some things than I am, and therefore I give way to those things. But we have a good partnership. I'm still learning to be a father. I'm always learning to be a father. It's one thing to father toddlers. It's another thing to father teenagers. Now I have to learn how to father adults, right? I have to recognize that my role is now just a consultant. I can't dictate to them what they do. I can tell my son, but you still live at my house, so these are the rules of my house. But generally speaking, I am just a consultant. They come to me, they can ask advice, I give it to them, and I have to give it to them and walk away. Whatever they do with it, they do with it. So I'm still learning to be a father. I look back at my life as a father, and I think, I wish I could do it again and do it differently and do it better. But
you've identified those things to say, yes, this is something I definitely didn't want to.
Yeah. I think I've learned some things from my father. One, it took me a long time before I can tell my son that I loved him, because I thought that was locked away somewhere aside because of the relationship I had with my father. And one night I had a conversation with my father before he died, and I just let it all out. I said, I live all my life and I never felt that you love me, and that sort of thing. And that night, my father said, that's not true. I love you.
Was that the first time you were hearing it?
Yeah. And I look at all the reasons why I thought he didn't love me. I don't think my father ever went to a PTA meeting. I don't think my father ever went to a school concert that I played at. I don't think my father did any of those things. My father provided well. All right, we never suffered. I always had money. We get to go where we want to go. But I don't think my father did those things. And because he didn't tell me that he loved me, next thing is that regardless of what's going on in our lives, if some person else had an issue, my father, the pastor, went and he helped people with their issues. So he pastored well, much to the disadvantage of us. That's how I felt about it. So I felt like, you're out pastoring people and we need you. Or I'll be home sick and he go to pray for somebody else before he prayed for me. And so those are things that helped to shape me. So then when my son come along, I knew I loved him. I knew that, I wouldn't trade my son for the world, but I couldn't tell my son I love him. It was hard. But that night on the phone, when I had that conversation with my dad, and my dad said, no, I loved you. I always loved you. And he said, of all my sons, you're the one who followed my footsteps. You're the pastor, you're this, And I'm sitting on the bed on our phone, and tears run down my eyes. And Sharon walks into the bedroom at the same time. And she saw me sitting on the phone, and I'm crying. And she turned around and she left. She respected that moment.
She knew who you were talking to?
Yeah, she knew I was talking to my father. She respected that moment. And after that moment, it became easier for me to tell Stefan that I loved him. But it was not easy for Stefan to tell me back. So I would say to him, Stefan, I love you. And he was like,
Pig's grunt.
Right?
Oh, okay.
But I know that he loved me. I know we would do things together, and But I think and that's why as fathers we have to know that we are not just affecting our children, but we're affecting generations, right? So as a father, I still think I'm growing. I want the best for my children. I don't boast, but I'm happy that my children are still involved in church. I didn't give them the option.
They had to be involved.
No, I didn't say they have to be involved. We just never discussed it. This is what we do. This is what we do. So when I was planting a church, it wasn't me planting a church. This is what we are going to do.
Families planting
So we are planting a church. So when we started this church, it started with just us. This was the core group, the four of us. This is who we are. Asha had a friend who lived with us, and she was part of this. Right? You are in. This is what we do. So I never said you have to go to church. But if they say they don't want to go to church, we will have a discussion around it. What's going on? But this is what we do. If we don't do this, who's going to do it? Right? And I still feel like at this moment the church has grown, but we are still the original stakeholders. And if nobody else turns up, we're going to turn up and we're going to have church. We're not doing church because 100 people are coming. We do church because this is what we do. Right? So to see my family in church, to see that my daughter was able to get married and her husband is in church, he's involved. I tell him all the time, my man, you're all in, you're a ward now, right? So you're all in.
Yeah.
So it is being a husband and a father is probably the greatest ministry that anybody can have. I don't want it that I've given all to our church and I've lost my family. Right? They are primary for me, and I say it all the time. I want to say it now again publicly. My family is first. My ministry is second. So for me, it is God, marriage, children, anything else. Okay. And that's why I have to respect my own boundaries. There are times when people may want to call and want it. I have to respect. And if something is going on in my family, I have to give that my first attention. Hence why you want to build a church with people who understand we are all carrying this weight. It's not the pastor's church. It's not, if it's one person to be here, it is the pastor. No, we all carrying this burden. And I like when people could come and say, Pastor, I'm going to take care of that. What I don't like is when you tell me you're going to take care of it and then you don't. Because when you say you're going to take care of it, then I focus on something else. And then that's done. So and I'm saying this before apologies, if I had to choose between ministry and family, I'm going to choose family. Because my family is first. And I need to be able to disciple them first. The fact that they're all involved in ministry makes it easier for me to do both.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. So lastly, let's say that there is somebody who may have experienced similar early church hurt or disappointments in church, or they may be a church leader as well. they're just struggling. They've had it, things dealt poorly for them or badly with them, and they're struggling to move beyond, to forgive, to be encouraged, to probably still feel like God is still working on their behalf. What would you say to such a person?
I would say, first and foremost, trust the Lord. Trust the Lord. But find community. Find
Not
community.
but, and.
And. Yes, and. Yeah, thank you. I think community is so important for our personal growth. Um, um, I've said to many pastors in recent years, I mean, you talk to pastors, and pastors, people normally say being a pastor is a lonely journey. I tell people I've not felt lonely
Really?
in this journey. I mean, you have those moments where you know this is only me. This is only me now. But generally speaking, I've not felt lonely because I've always felt I had a community. I have men in my life who don't have to fear if they call me Derek, right? As a matter of fact, anybody can call me Derek. That's cool. But I've built this reliance on community. So now you, as a pastor, you have to be careful how much you give out, personally. But I have men in my life, primarily men. There are some women. I try to keep that limited, but you have men in my life who I can call and I can cry with, and maybe you are a person I might rely on, but you have to have somebody else that when you don't present yourself reliable, that I can cry to.
Somebody else,
Yeah. So I think being able to, for those people who are hurting, to find a community where you can be you. We've had some pastors who've passed through Harvest, and they got plugged in. They felt the impact of community. I think that's what's important. Also, to change your perspective around church hurt. I don't like the terminology church hurt. It's real, but I don't like it because hurting people hurt people. And why we call it church hurt is because we don't expect that in church. We expect Christians to behave differently. So we call it church hurt. But if we want to label church hurt, we can also label work hurt. We can label family hurt. We can label supermarket hurt. And we can label whatever hurt, right? When people have experiences at work that are negative, they still go to work. Because in the week or even in a month, they can get paid, so they tied that. People hurt people wherever they are. And I think it happens in churches, and there are a number of things. One, the Matthew 18 principle: if somebody hurts you or whatever, you go to them, you go back with 2 witnesses, you take it to the church, you write them off. Sometimes it may mean that you go through that process, and if it doesn't work, it may mean you have to switch congregations and go somewhere else. Don't give up on God, but find a new community and trust that community. That's where forgiveness comes in. You have to be able to forgive and move forward. Now, if I go into a community and I can't trust that community, why am I there? Right? I have to be able to trust that community and open up myself to be hurt by this community. Not that I want to be hurt. By God, if I don't trust the community and open up myself, then I'm going to come in, I'm going to give half. I've got to come in and give all. And you'll find that the best way to deal with hurt is to work, get involved, do it. And I want to say that Harvest is an open door to anybody who've experienced church hurt. I've heard quite a few people say that Harvest is like a hospital. And I was like, And they said, so many hurting people have come to Harvest. We try to keep church simple, the word and worship. Feed people that way, you get help with the hurt. I want us to move past the fact that people see us as a hospital. Yes, we are a hospital. We help you if you're hurting, but we're also an army. So once you have been fixed, and once you feel like you've had some sort of healing, you want to enlist and work. How long are you going to sit in the hospital? Nobody wants to stay in the hospital for months, getting drips and oxygen. Once you are better, get up and work. That's where you want to be.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Pastor Derek, or should I say Bishop Derek Ward.
I'm Derek Ward. I'm Derek Ward, who's the pastor, who's an ordained bishop,
Okay.
who has a master's degree, who have this, but I'm Derek Ward.
What's next, by the way, from your master's? You plan to be a doctor, a professor, emeritus, apostle?
I seriously contemplated doing the doctoral program. So I've been accepted.
You've been accepted to do it?
A while ago.
Congratulations, man.
But I couldn't justify at that point in time just spending that money again. I mean, to God be the glory. I did very well in the master's program. I graduated with high honors, and I got a phone call telling me about this doctoral program, and and I wish the phone call was also that we're gonna pay for it for you. Right? I don't have a problem giving the time towards it, but at this point in time, most people don't understand that there are medical challenges in the family, and I don't think I want to spend that money. Just I mean, at one point in time I say it's just a piece of paper. It's more than just a piece of paper. The paper justifies the time that you were there, right? But maybe down the road I'll go and do it.
Maybe by the time this is aired, you started that journey.
Well, again, it's about the money right now.
Yeah.
But I think it makes a very good retirement package. I could transition to something else. I'm not in active pastoral ministry, but I can spend the rest of my days writing, teaching, doing whatever, and have some level of credibility. I mean, from the academic world, your qualifications give you some level of credibility, and that's basically it. But I'm not doing a doctoral program because I want to have a title of doctor. Titles don't make a difference to me. At the end of the day, regardless of what accolades I may have, I still want to be Derek Ward. Derek A. Ward.
A.
Yes.
On that note, thank you, Derek A. Ward, for the time here. We really enjoyed learning about your life and how we could really work in church. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.